So much of what Americans believe about this president is pure fiction, scripted by I don't know who, Hollywood writers I don't know. We don't really know who Jeremiah Wright was to him. This is more than spin or political gain, and it is important because we've heard all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately, the president's life, as you will see, is pure fiction. He contradicts himself on prompter. He'll say one thing about his family and his past and another thing about his family and his past, and they don't match. It's fiction. And we'll prove that to you tonight with certifiable fact. What most people don't know is the extent of the lies that we have been told. In retrospect, it seems as though everything that Barack Obama has said about his family has been carefully calculated and written and read off a teleprompter for political gain. Because almost none of it, think of this, almost none of it is true. Even the way Barack Obama says his father, Barack Sr., arrived in America for school. What he says is false. Watch.
So the Kennedys decided we're going to do an airlift. We're going to go out to Africa. And we're going to start bringing young Africans over to this country and give them scholarships to study so that they can learn what a wonderful country America is. And this young man named Barack Obama got one of those tickets and came over to this country.
Okay, not true. John F. Kennedy wasn't even the president when Barack Sr. arrived in Honolulu to enroll at the University of Hawaii in 1959. Obama Sr. was able to take advantage of a program provided by Jackie Robinson and Harry Belafonte, who doesn't really exactly see things the way John F. Kennedy sees things, or maybe you. But it was a fund for Africans. So why would he say the Kennedys did it? Because the timeline is wrong. Now, we can assume that, well, he just got it wrong that one time. Or was it for political gain of some reason? Or does he even know the truth anymore? Again, one little small fact and you're like, okay, whatever. But he throws JFK into the story. Then there is the fable about his parents getting together as a result of the march on Selma, Alabama, in the same speech. Watch.
There's some good craziness going on because they looked at each other and they decided, we know that in the world as it has been, it might not be possible for us to get together and have a child. But something's stirring across the country because of what happened in Selma, Alabama, because some folks are willing to march across a bridge. And so they got together and Barack Obama Jr. was born.
That's a great story, but none of it is true. See, the problem with that one is that Barack Obama Jr. was born 4 years before the march on Selma took place. How's that work?
Don't tell me I don't have a claim on Selma, Alabama.
Well,
don't tell me I'm not coming home when I come to Selma, Alabama. I'm here because somebody marched.
No, you're not. You don't have a claim. You're not here because they marched. You were born before they marched. You were born in 1961, and the Selma March was 1965. So, Mr. President, where are you getting this story? You are not coming home when you come to Selma, Alabama. Now, during his coming out speech, if you will, I mean, not to be confused with last night's coming out speech, this is the one where he burst in the national spotlight at the DNC convention in 2004. We were told that he was a young moderate uniter, a fresh, post-racial, post-partisan politician. And boy, his speech really sounded like that. I remember it. It was great. This is how he began his speech.
Tonight is a particular honor for me because, let's face it, my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely. My father was a foreign student, born and raised in a small village in Kenya. He grew up herding goats, went to school in a tin roof shack. His father, my grandfather, was a cook, a domestic servant to the British.
Okay. Now, according to Barack Obama Sr.'s first wife, Kezia, that's not true. It's not true. According to his father's wife, not true. Barack Sr. married Kezia when he was 18 and she was 16. Her parents were upset and wanted her to come back home. So Senior's father, his grandfather, gave Kezia's family 14 cows as a dowry. Wait a minute, he had a tin roof and he was a servant with the British master. How many servants of the British masters have 14 cows in which to buy their son's wife? My father was a baker. We didn't have any cows or wouldn't have that kind of money to buy my wife. But Barack continued.
My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation.
The love his parents shared is improbable. That much is absolutely true. Considering that Barack Sr. was still married to the aforementioned Kenyan woman named Kezia, who had 2 children with him. So it was improbable. So his dad comes over while still married and 2 children over there. He comes over here. That's where he meets Barack's mother, Stanley Ann Dunham. Barack and Dunham never even shared the same residence. Not to mention the fact that 1 week after Barack was born, Barack's mom, Ann Dunham, took Barack away and left Hawaii to enroll at the University of Washington in Seattle, leaving Sr. behind. By the time she came back to Hawaii, Barack Sr. was already long gone, for good. First off to school in Boston, and then Harvard, and then he met somebody in Harvard. He married yet a 3rd woman named Ruth. And he took Ruth back to Kenya with him, where his first wife, whom he was still married to, waited. So he had 3 wives. So that, yes, I would agree that, he didn't really get into the details there, but yes, improbable love is probably a good word for it. But as far as his parents' abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation, this is where it really gets dicey. Anne lived much of her life in Indonesia and Pakistan and anywhere else but America. Barack Sr. got his free first-class education in Hawaii and then at Ivy League's Harvard and then hightailed it back to Kenya, never to return to America. Other than a month-long visit to Hawaii when Barack Obama was 10, that was it. He accepted the priceless American education and then used it to benefit himself and Kenya. But how did he use it? To promote American ideals that he loved? No, he used it to promote his brand of socialism and communism in his homeland's government. At his star-making speech in 2004, Barack Obama said this.
They would give me an African name, Barack, or Blessed, believing that in a tolerant America, your name is no barrier to success.
Okay, that's great. That's the kind of thing that we all said, wow, that is great. This is a storybook. Exactly. It's interesting because he went by the name Barry for most of his childhood, except for the exact opposite reason. Obama says his mother advised him not to switch from being called Barry to Barack for her fear that his African name would mean something very, very bad for him in America. So they didn't name him Barack because they had great love for America and respect, and they knew, no, when he tried to change it later when he was becoming a radical, she said, don't, you can't trust America. So which was it? Obama's highly acclaimed book, Dreams from My Father, details his struggles, such as that one, and other racial tensions, causing him confusion about his place in the world. It set the tone for the post-racial excitement his legions of followers felt. In the book, he told the heartbreaking story of visiting his mother one day at work at the U.S. Embassy when the family had moved with his stepfather to Indonesia. He had leafed through a copy of Life magazine, and he found a horrible, shocking photo, one that he would never forget, and an article about a black man who was so uncomfortable with the color of his skin that he bleached his skin in effort to become white. It was shocking. It was a rude awakening for little Barack at the time. Unfortunately, it's not true. When Life was contacted for the details of that story, Life said, We've looked it up. We've never run that story in this magazine. Obama's people said, well, then it was Ebony. And then it was, well, who knows what it was? That was Barack's reply to the anomaly. By the way, Ebony also was contacted. They never had run that story either. Who knows what it was? I do. It was fiction. Another unnerving racial story in Obama's brilliant and moving autobiography that showcased the racial division that he had overcome. Was the story of his white girlfriend in New York, whose name we now know to be Genevieve. After moving there to attend Columbia, one particular night, he took her out to see a black playwright in the city. Well, this is another very moving part of the book. Barack found the play extremely funny, but she came out confused. Here's his description of that fateful night. In the book, he says, after the play was over, my friends started talking about black people, why they were so angry all the time. I said it was a matter of remembering. Nobody asked the Jews why the Jews remember the Holocaust. I think I said. And she said, that's different. And I said, it wasn't. And she said, that anger was just a dead end. And we had a big fight right there in front of the theater. When we got back to the car, she started crying. She couldn't be black, she said. She would if she could, but she couldn't. She could only be herself, and that just wasn't enough. When the press recently finally contacted this woman, she said, glad you called. Nothing like that ever happened. Nothing like that ever happened. With her, anyway. Oh, yeah, that's right, Barack Obama now admits. The girlfriend he was talking to was a compression. He was using a composite girl when describing his dates in New York. How do you have a compression conversation like that about race? Answer, you don't. It's script writing. This uniter, this post-racial icon of hope and change. Oh, he did stir the racial stew, though, to the point to where even he threw his beloved grandmother, who raised him when his mom left him, he threw her under the racial bus. Look at this and watch his eyes. He's talking about Jeremiah Wright here, defending Jeremiah Wright, but watch, he's reading the teleprompter in something so personal about his grandmother.
I can no more disown him than I can disown my white grandmother, a woman who helped raise me, a woman who sacrificed again and again for me, a woman who loves me as much as she loves anything in this world, but a woman who once confessed her fear of black men who passed her by on the street.
No way.
And who on more than one occasion has uttered racial or ethnic stereotypes that made me cringe.
That's not true. Yeah, I don't know if that happened or not, but this is a storyline. Nobody says that about their grandmother and has to read it. If it's true, you look at the camera in the eye. You don't need to read that. A few days later, he explains this to a radio show.
The point I was making was not that my grandmother harbors any racial animosity. She doesn't. Right. But she is a typical white person who, if she sees somebody on the street that she doesn't know, there's a reaction that's been bred into our experiences that don't go away and that sometimes come out in the wrong way.
I have to tell you, man, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, this is a show that you need to preserve. You need to burn this onto a DVD and preserve this show. Somebody needs to remember all this stuff, because this will be history someday. Someday all of this truth will come out. No white politician could have ever survived a comment like that, typical kind of any person, with a certain reaction that had been bred into them. That's crazy talk. They'd have no career left, nor should they. And they certainly wouldn't have been elected president of the United States. But Barack Obama would do or say anything to become president. And his scriptwriters and his minions in the media helped him do it all away. He could look at the American people directly in the eye through a teleprompter and flat out lie over and over again, as he did in the debates with John McCain, as he did on one of the rare occasions when McCain brought up his seedy relationship with terrorist Bill Ayers.
So, and you launched your political campaign in Mr. Ayers' living room.
That's absolutely not true.
And the facts are facts and records are records.
That's not the...
It's not true? Yes, it is. It's an amazing work of fiction that you just watched. It's not true. It's one that even the left-leaning factcheck.org verifies. While trying to cover and excuse Obama over silly details of the relationship with Ayers, and for that matter, even covering desperately for Ayers, they said referring to him as a terrorist is a stretch. Fact Check specifically mentions at least half a dozen Ayers meetings that Obama lied about or covered up, including board meetings, retreats, news conferences together. Oh, and yes, in fact, Ayers hosted a meet and greet coffee for Obama, who was running for state senate and who lived 3 blocks away from him. That's from the left. Yes, in Bill Ayers' living room. And he lied. Why? You know what's interesting is the part of Obama's script or novel or fairy tale life that have been left out is Bill Ayers' father. Bill Ayers' dad, Tom, gave Obama his first professional break. Bill Ayers' dad was a mentor to Barack, but they never met. I'm just now beginning to understand what Bill Clinton meant when he said, it's a fairy tale. And he's not talking about a black man becoming president. It's that this man's life is a fairy tale. It's a fable. It's made up stories. You might remember that Obama went back and forth incessantly about his Marxist spiritual advisor, Jeremiah Wright.
I did not hear such incendiary language myself personally, either in conversations with him or when I was in the pew. Did I ever hear him make remarks that could be considered controversial while I sat in the church? Yes.
Okay. All of that and so much more was before he even got to the White House. I'll show you the myths since taking office when we come back. I have been showing you Obama's life of fiction. I wish these things weren't true, because when you really start to unravel all this stuff, something sinister is here. We have somebody who's had their entire life fictionalized. And when he took the office of the presidency, the lies became more blatant, but more political, lying from everything about supporting single-payer health care to doctors amputating feet and tonsils for more profit in a desperate attempt to pass health care. He promised to close Gitmo in a year, to saying that when it came to border security.
Then they wanted a fence. Well, the fence is now basically complete.
The fence is now basically complete. I mean, it's the typical politician lies, but then so far beyond. The fence is 5% complete, 5%, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Basically, that's complete, right? I mean, if you need $100 for dinner and you have a $5 bill in your pocket, I mean, any waiter will tell you, hey, you're good. I mean, basically, you've completely paid for dinner, right? No. In his effort to stoke the fires of class warfare, he is continually lying about the amount paid in taxes by the wealthiest Americans. He lied, never doing signing statements. Yes, he is. No lobbyists in the White House. Yes, like the first week. The Arizona immigration law. What? Pay as you go. No. Shovel-ready jobs. There are none. Jobs created or saved. No earmarks in the stimulus package, and on and on and on. So how can you possibly trust anything this man says? Anything that this man has said. even when he speaks of America in positive terms, it rings hollow because of all of the falsehoods he has spoken, and it is a pattern of behavior.
It is the light of opportunity that led my father across an ocean. It's the founding ideals that the flag draped over my father's coffin stand for.
It's the flag, the ideals of that flag draped over my father's coffin. Really? Let me see if I have this right. Your father, who's buried outside Nairobi in Kenya, had a flag, the American flag, draped over his coffin? Why? I mean, that's weird. When he spoke so glowingly at the 04 convention of America's founding document, it sounded real.
Our pride is based on a very simple premise, summed up in a declaration made over 200 years ago. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the true genius of America.
Okay, two things. I've never heard him since President say endowed by our Creator, but I've also never heard him say that's the true genius. I wish we heard more of that and less of this.
But I think it is an imperfect document, and I think it is a document that reflects some deep flaws in American culture, the colonial culture nascent at that time. It also reflected the fundamental flaw of this country that continues to this day.
Okay, and then he said, of course, this.
There was a tendency to lose track of the political and community organizing and activities on the ground that are able to put together the actual coalitions of power through which you bring about redistributive change.
Okay. All of this from quite possibly the quintessential example of America's greatness, of the hope without fundamental change, the opportunity available here because of our exceptionalism, as he said in 04 in that speech.
They imagined me going to the best schools in the land, even though they weren't rich, because in a generous America, you don't have to be rich to achieve your potential.
And that's what happened to him. Barack Hussein Obama, who wasn't wealthy, who has said 100 times he was the one with a funny name, the one who came from an interracial, broken family, who had no connections. Still, he attended, strangely, the most prestigious high school in Hawaii, then somehow went on to Occidental College in California. And not one, but two exclusive Ivy League schools, Columbia and Harvard Law. He then rose to political prominence in Illinois to such an extent that he then became the most powerful man on planet Earth. Now, as Joe Biden might say, that's a storybook, man. But no, Joe, that's not a storybook. If it were true, that's America. That can happen here. But what's the problem? Why does he constantly whine and complain about America, as he does here?
You've got to make pretty tough choices when you are first starting out. You might have to put off buying a house. It might mean that you can't, go after that great idea for a startup that you have because you're still paying off loans.
What are you?
Maybe you've got to wait longer to start a family or save for retirement. And this is something Michelle and I know about firsthand. And we were lucky to land good jobs with a steady income.
Okay. Now, let's see if I have this one right. It's tough out there because you getting out of college might have to wait to buy your own home. Yeah, you're going to have to wait before you become the CEO of ExxonMobil, too. That's life. I don't know anybody who got out of college and bought their own home. Who gets a home right out of college? Who lands their ultimate dream job as soon as they graduate? And for that, he claims that's unlucky, and he was lucky. No, he was given amazing opportunities in this land because of the greatness of this country and his hard work, his effort, his talent. But this is Barack Obama's biggest and ugliest lie. And he tells it over and over again, and one we must never believe, that you can't do it like he did. You can't make it without his programs, without his government intrusion. You can't do it until he fundamentally transforms the United States of America.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
How true that is. One of the few things Obama has said that it was absolutely true. I contend what you think you know about this president and this president's life is nothing but fiction. When we come back, I want to talk to you about this man. I mean, if this man was going to marry your daughter, you and your wife, your spouse, would sit down and ask some strong questions. This man is in charge of my daughter and my son's futures. And so some questions that you and I need to discuss when we come back. This is a hand-carved exact replica of the Resolute desk that sits in the Oval Office. The man who sits behind this desk is the most powerful man on the planet. He shapes the lives of millions, not just here in America, but all over the globe. The man who sits behind here is our representative. He's the guy that speaks for all of us. He's the guy, when he goes overseas, we say, he's our representative. That's an important task. I contend Barack Obama does not, even Democrats, does not represent the average American. I bet he doesn't represent 80 or 90%. He's not like us, and it has nothing to do with color. Nothing. Here he is, the man who is leading the free world. He's leading the greatest nation on earth. He is and will be bashing Mitt Romney relentlessly for everything he believes now and in the past. And yet we don't really know what he believes. Remember, he is our representative. I want to talk to you here a little bit about what we really know. And does he represent you? Does he represent anyone you know? I mean, look, I expect that we're going to disagree with people from time to time. We're going to disagree on policies, and we're going to have, as George Washington said, battles on the battlefield of ideas. We're going to duke it out. But there's something wrong. And it's time that we sit with our friends and have a reasonable conversation and ask them a few questions. I want you to ask your friends this. Are you, or can you name a friend or a relative that's like this man? Can you name anyone with, let's say, 3, 4, 5 of what I'm going to show you, 5 of them or 3 of them that you go, yeah, I know that guy? See how many you can do. Ronald Reagan said if we can get 7 out of 10, we're good. We don't have to agree on everything. How many out of this list of about 20 questions? First, are you or do you know anyone with the kind of liberation theology, Christian understanding of Jesus Christ of Jeremiah Wright? Do you know anybody that would have gone to that church? Do you know anybody who believes, who's a Christian, who believes in collective salvation?
And recognizing that my fate remained tied up with their fates, that my individual salvation is not going to come about without a collective salvation for the country.
This is not a Christian view. Do you know anybody who believes that they cannot go to heaven unless everybody is saved in the country? How about this? Do you know anyone who is raised and or mentored by communists? And then don't deny that communist past. Do you have friends or acquaintances with Marxist, communist, or domestic terror ties? I don't think the guy had a chance of being anything but a communist. You kind of feel bad for him when you look at the family tree or the communist tree here. Here's his dad. Barack Obama's dad, you remember him from Dreams from My Father. In other words, the dreams that I got from my father. Well, who was he? If he's got dreams that Barack Obama is downloading, what were his dreams? There's a new report out now from the London Daily Mail. It's part of a 1959 study. The State Department was worried at the time that Kenyans studying in the United States, including Barack Obama's dad, had a reputation for being anti-American and anti-white. Wow. You would think, I mean, if George Romney was anti-Kenyan, you'd think we'd hear about that, don't you? The report added, the arrival here of these students, many of them in different academic caliber and ill-prepared for the venture, is likely to give rise to difficult problems. And they were more than right, more than they could possibly ever know. So his dad hates America and is anti-white. When his dad dies, Barack was young. But what about the other caretakers in his life? Where did he go? Well, Grandma and Grandpa, they look great and everything, and I'm sure they're very nice people, but they took Barack Obama to the Little Red Schoolhouse. It's red because it's a communist schoolhouse. That's why it was called the Little Red Schoolhouse. Mom was a communist and a radical. When she got her new husband, Lolo, Obama's stepfather, they moved to Jakarta. That's, I think, where he had dog. Apparently, Lolo wasn't radical enough, so Mom takes little Barack away because he's not communist enough and moves Barack back to Hawaii with the grandparents, where the grandfather decides, I got to find him a mentor, Frank Marshall Davis. Frank Marshall Davis just happens to be a communist. I mean, what are the odds? Again, don't you feel a little uncomfortable? I mean, I feel bad for him, actually, because he didn't have a chance. When he goes back to college, who does he hang out with? Let Barack Obama say it for himself. Here he is.
To avoid being mistaken for such a sellout, I chose my friends carefully. The more politically active black students, the foreign students, the Chicanos, the Marxist professors and structural feminists and punk rock performance poets.
Okay. So the apple's not falling far from the tree. Of course, the tree doesn't have apples because they lived in a food desert. But anyway, as an adult, he finds Jesus. Okay, that's great. But who's he find it from? A guy who says Jesus is a black man and hates white men. And he also hates the Jews. Jesus does. He's a radical Marxist, anti-Semite, Reverend Jeremiah Wright. He defends him all the way, and when he can't take the heat anymore, and they finally say, just throw the guy under the bus, where does he turn for his spiritual advice? Another guy, Jim Wallace, another Marxist, a spiritual Marxist. Really? He meets in Chicago, but it's definitely not friends, with radical underground, Weather Underground member Bill Ayers, another Marxist, communist, radical revolutionary. Then he teaches school about this guy. He teaches in college Saul Alinsky, another radical communist that this guy understands, this guy understands, this guy understood, this guy understood. Really? When he goes to Congress, he is the farthest left out of everyone there. Even the self-described socialist Bernie Sanders, who I have respect for because at least he says what he is. He's farther left than the socialist. And then he goes on, as president, to appoint Van Jones, a communist. Well, he was. I haven't heard about his turning point. Valerie Jarrett, this is his best friend, Valerie Jarrett. Guess who her father was? Her father-in-law just happened to be a Chicago reporter, a communist, and a buddy of Frank Marshall Davis, the communist that Barack hung out with. This is the tie on how these two got together. By the way, we have a new book coming out called The Communist. It's not written by me. It's written by Paul Kengor. He's the author of Ronald Reagan, and he tells the story of Barack Obama's real mentor. It's critical that you understand who mentored him. Look for it this July. But I warn you, Obama is living in one big communist tree. I mean, he's like a communist Keebler elf, you know, that gives the cookies away for fairness and justice. How many communists do you know? Do you have friends that believe that terrorism doesn't really exist and that by definition, jihad is a holy struggle?
Our enemy is not terrorism because terrorism is but a tactic. Our enemy is not terror, because terror is a state of mind, and as Americans, we refuse to live in fear. Nor do we describe our enemy as jihadists or Islamists, because jihad is a holy struggle, a legitimate tenet of Islam, meaning to purify oneself or one's community.
How many people do you know believe that? This man surrounds himself with people like this. How about somebody who believes, really truly believes, that the Muslim Brotherhood is largely secular and a good force?
The term Muslim Brotherhood is an umbrella term for a variety of movements. In the case of Egypt, a very heterogeneous group, largely secular, which has eschewed violence and has decried al-Qaeda as a perversion of Islam.
Do you know anybody that thinks that NASA's foremost goal should be Muslim outreach to help them feel good?
When I became the NASA administrator, or before I became the NASA administrator, he charged me with 3 things. One was he wanted me to help re-inspire children to want to get into science and math. He wanted me to expand our international relationships. And third, and perhaps foremost, he wanted me to find a way to reach out to the Muslim world and engage much more with dominantly Muslim nations to help them feel good about their historic contribution to science and engineering.
Do you know anybody that believes now that Occupy Wall Street features the best people in our country?
Would love to hear some of these Republicans who are attacking these struggling people and young people and calling them divisive say something about this kind of despicable attack on the best people in our country right now. The most selfless are down there on Wall Street.
Is it even conceivable that you know or associate with somebody like this, or somebody who thinks that killing Osama bin Laden was an actual tough decision to make?
Intelligence reports locating Osama bin Laden were promising, but inconclusive, and there was internal debate as to what the president should do.
The entire national security apparatus was in that room. And the president turns to every principal in the room. What do you recommend I do? And they say, it's a close call, Mr. President. As he walked out the room, it dawned on me, he's all alone. This is his decision. He took the harder and the more honorable path.
The heart? At the same time he had a hard time making this decision, do you know anybody who would make that decision and then insist that you have a blame someone else memo ready just in case it went poorly? Who in your circle believes that Israel is the biggest obstacle to peace and prosperity in the world? And it's not just Israel, it's Israel and the United States. Do you know anyone who believes the United States Constitution needs to be a photo negative for it to be workable for today?
Generally, the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties. It says what the states can't do to you, says what the federal government can't do to you, but it doesn't say what the federal government or the state government must do on your behalf.
Would you or anyone you know take a gift given to us by England after 9/11, and then when you get into office, take that bust and say, you got to take this back to you? And when the Prime Minister said, no, 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 that was a gift, you can put it in a museum, you would have that boxed up and shipped back over to England, our closest ally. Do you know anybody that would do that? Do you know anyone who has a wife or a husband that was never really proud of their country until you were nominated or until something good happened in your life?
And let me tell you something. For the first time in my adult lifetime, I'm really proud of my country.
Wow. Do you know anyone who would actively defend and fight for the right to allow a baby to die in a closet without any treatment if that baby was born after a failed abortion? Anyone. Barack Obama did it. How many people do you know would give a shout out to somebody, hey, good to see you, right before announcing that 13 American soldiers were murdered by an Islamic extremist on our own soil.
I hear that Dr. Joe Medicine Crow was around, and so I want to give a shout out to that Congressional Medal of Honor winner. Good to see you.
Do you know anybody who is a really big Israeli supporter? Somebody who says they are our best friend and we've got to be there every step of the way, who then has the prime minister of that country fly over halfway across the world, has dinner scheduled, you meet with the prime minister, and then you're like, you know what, I can't make dinner tonight. And then you go and have dinner with your friends while you make the prime minister wait, and then humiliates him. And then this great supporter of Israel would go and visit all of the Muslim countries all around Israel, but can't find any time in his schedule to go to Israel. Do you know anybody who says they're the biggest supporter of Israel? Die hard, they're our best friends, a loyal supporter, but they believe they should go back to their indefensible 1967 borders as a starting point for negotiations?
The United States believes that negotiations should result in two states with permanent Palestinian borders with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, and permanent Israeli borders with Palestine. We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines.
My guess is you don't know anybody like this. You don't know anybody who shares these beliefs, let alone 3 of these beliefs, or 5. Yet all of these are firmly held by Barack Obama and all those that he puts around. And we just scratching the surface. He's in charge of our future. Is he a good representation of what you believe?